All right. Lovely. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, I would love if you're willing just to introduce yourself, your name, anything else you'd like to share.
Totally. I'm Julia, use she, they pronouns. I'm a queer artist and astrologer and maker, and I live in Portland, Oregon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And thanks for joining me today. We're here to talk about what was the program called Erotic Embodiment. I'm actually changing the name to Slow Burn, but
Mm,
you went through the course and would love to just kind of talk about your experience in the course. So just to begin, I'm kind of curious, like, where were you at when you first saw me, putting this course out in the world? Like, where were you at with your own sense of self, sexuality, all the things?
totally. I would say I was honestly a little bit burnt out. I have done a lot of courses, I've done a lot of online work, in-person work. Um, yeah, I've had a full range of experience, like trying to work on my sexual wellness and also like trying to achieve a certain standard of sexual pleasure and expansion and healing that felt like it was exactly what I said, like trying. Um,
Mhm.
and so the level of burnout that I was at was in this place of like slight hesitation around signing up for another course and being like, I really don't. I recognize my own like internal workings of like picking myself apart or pushing myself or shaming myself or comparing myself, and like I had noticed those patterns come up in other like sexuality courses and not had a lot of support around that process, and was like, I can't do that to myself again. So I'm feeling a yes, and was like really called to your course because of the container that it held, or explicitly around being like, wherever you are is where we start. And like, even if you are burnout, actually, this is the space for you. Um, but I was a little bit hesitant, a little bit nervous around like putting myself in a position where I would be like doing healing work again, in this way that I had come to know as being hard on myself.
Totally. Yeah. And so then I'm curious how the course was for you. Like, you decided to say yes, even though you had this apprehension. And
Mhm.
then how was that compared to perhaps the other healing work you'd done or sexuality work you'd done? Like, what did it offer you?
Um, well, I think first of all, the thing I'd been in other like consent-based trauma-informed spaces before, but this was it's like we can never have too many and never have too many experiences being told and taught and reminded that our bodies get to choose the level of engagement that we want. And so just right off the bat, like you creating that level of safety in the container to like engage, tap out, go at the speed we want, go at the pace we want, that was different and allowed for just like another layer of sinking into my body, another layer of sinking into my skin and to my nervous system that I just hadn't experienced before. Um, I think that the one of the most impactful parts of the course for me was the nervous system understanding, the information, the lectures on what is actually happening in my body when I'm having a trauma response, and specifically around sex and intimacy and romance, because I'd done a lot of like nervous system work and thinking about like window of tolerance and how to come back into that, but not explicitly around sex.
Yeah.
And like the explicitness of talking about what happens in our bodies when we're triggered or overwhelmed sexually, like A, made me feel normal, which is an extraordinary gift. Like after the narratives of brokenness were so strong in my body, and that kind of shame spiral and that imprint of there's something wrong with me, I don't function normally, I am broken. Like just being able to come to a space with that and not being like bypassed or told like um you can be this like radiant goddess who heals in this way, you just have to get through like this almost this maze of like expectation or force or pushing or trying to fit yet another model, even though Um, those models can be harmful because they not one size fits all. This course was like an exhale into my system, into my authentic like architecture as a sexual being, into a sense of there's nothing wrong with me. And there's so much more that the course gave me, but I think that's like the beginning of energetically and somatically and like in my system, what I still feel the impacts of is like, I am not broken. And now I get to learn, which this course helped me with, all of the tools to work with my unique system rather than work against it or rather than think I need to fit a certain model. Like, and you gave me so many tools to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for speaking that. It feels really, really potent and powerful, just like hearing you say those words, like, I am not broken. So it sounds like in the past, doing some courses around sexuality or around healing, around these things. On one end, it was like always trying to like achieve something almost unobtainable. And in this space, it helped you land into where you're at and what you are. And that in of itself is beautiful. And like, yes, there might be places that I want to grow or expand or shift, but like actually accepting myself in the here and now is giving me then the ability to move towards whatever healing that might be, as opposed to like a reverse way of doing it.
Exactly. And I think that like that presencing of what's actually happening for me here and now and being like really willing to accept that and given the support to accept that and embrace that meant that I was then able to like sink into an understanding of what my pacing is sexually and intimately and romantically that was part of my trauma. Like part of my trauma was overriding my pacing to rush into urgency of connection because of that deep insecurity that there was something wrong if I couldn't make that connection in the way that it was supposed to be, right? And so I think that this course helped me enormously with like honoring my pacing and like it's a work in progress. You know, I have so many years of a freight train going in one direction, and I really, really appreciated the like metaphor you used of like a boat or like a cruise ship that's going in one direction and then we're if we're turning it, it's like, oh, this is going to take a while. This momentum is going to take a while to shift. And just so many normalizing the course was so normalizing for the experiences that I've had and the reactions that I have and the pain that I have and all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, I love you bringing up like the slow aspect or even like, oh, the pacing aspect, because one of, like that is the reality with this course is that it is taking things, comparative to like maybe what else is out there on the market in terms of sexuality courses, which is a lot of like flash and a lot of like, oh yeah, become the orgasmic goddess and like a lot of like, oh, like go for the orgasm or go for the, you know, like the intensity or like the high, like oh, kind of feelings. And this space, slow burn, is a space where it is going at a much slower pace. And it is finding, okay, what uniquely works for you. And I'll say, just from a practitioner standpoint, there was like this insecurity in launching this course in the world. Cause I was like, who in the heck wants to go slow? You know, like we live in such a fast paced society and like, who's going to be interested in this or even maybe even understand like the intentionality I'm speaking of when I say slow, because it's not just everything slow, but it's actually like, how can I meet the slowest parts of myself? That's really what I feel like it's about. And so I'm just curious, yeah, how was that experience for you to do this kind of work in a much slower way? Like it was a 4-month long container. I'm changing it to a 5-month long container. Like the whole thing isn't this like, let's go thing.
It was so integrative and in a way that I had never experienced because of how slow it was and because of like I'll use the words simple and deep.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's not as if the information you were sharing was simple, but there was a simplicity to the fact that I knew I can show up once a week for 2 hours and I'm going to get a doable amount of information and a digestible amount of information. And then I'm going to get to like marinate and saturate in that for a whole week and then come back. And like that is really different to me than the model that I had been, the fastest, the most urgent, the most anxious parts of me had been leading and attached to in other courses, right? Of like, I want to get this done. I've been trying so long to heal. We have to hurry this up. Like, why isn't this working? I really love what you said about like meeting the slowest part of me, because that's what this course felt like. It was like protecting and catering to a part that never got heard or tended to or nourished, and actually giving it permission to be like, it's fine, it's okay, it's beautiful, however fast or slow you want to move. And there wasn't like a shaming of moving quickly or a shaming of like the difference in momentums. There was just an attunement to like, but what's really true for you. And yeah, I think that adding the layer again of like nervous system understanding onto it, of like what might happen, what's really normal, unshaming our trauma responses, like, and hearing from other people similar experiences over and over and over again was super helpful for me in building, again, this like new narrative inside of me that is like excited about the uniqueness of my process and excited about my sexuality in all of the different shades and temperatures and experiences of it, rather than trying to fit into something that I'm just not.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. And then I'm curious, like, if you were to recommend this to someone, like, who would you recommend it to? Or like, who do you think would be a good fit for this container?
Hmm. Yeah, anyone who is feeling like they've tried a lot of things and they've been dissatisfied with the actual physical or embodied impact that they've had. If you're a person who's like a nerd, a nervous system nerd, and loves to like hear about and understand and learn about the nervous system, this course is definitely for you. If you're a person who feels even a little bit of activation, like thinking about sex or intimacy or romance, and maybe overrides that, or maybe shames yourself for that, or maybe thinks you shouldn't be feeling that, like this course will be for you and help you understand what that process is and how to like work with it and hold it. I think if you're a person who yeah, just wants to exhale into your authenticity and give yourself a space to move slower, give yourself a space to get curious, give yourself a space to feel. This is a really excellent place for, I mean, I'm tempted to say like anyone, but I really do think that you very specifically called in, at least in this first container that I was in, like really called in a quality of like, we're tired of doing it in a way that makes us feel like we're tired of reaching, we're tired of pushing, you know. I was so tired of reaching and pushing, and was sure that like the problem was my capacity to reach and push, instead of this like experience of reaching and pushing for sexual pleasure is the problem. And that is what I learned from this space, is like this impulse to reach, this impulse to push, like there's something underneath that that needs care, not that like there's something wrong with my mechanism of reaching pleasure. It's yeah.
Totally. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And just for your like foresight of, yeah, I love that. Well, it could be for anyone, but also, yes, like what I heard, and one of the things you said is like a level of depth. Like this is pretty depth. I'm definitely a nervous system nerd. So I do go pretty in depth with like, okay, here's all the teachings around it, and then here's a way that it can land inside of your own body. but then also just like this aspect of pushing and how it's so exhausting. And like what I'm hearing in that is like you said, when I started this course, I was kind of in a state of burnout, but it's kind of like people are burnt out of healing, or burnt out of like trying, or burnt out of trying to become this thing that they've always told they could be, but they don't know how to even get there. Yeah, really landing on acceptance.
Totally. Yeah, and in that sense, like it just shifted away from it's like not a product oriented space
Mm-hmm.
in a really beautiful way, which I think probably as a practitioner is kind of scary to be like, I'm offering a space where you can be in process and like I'm not promising anything at the end of this. And
Mm-hmm.
yet that the cultivation of that um, safety and permission actually moved me further than any other sexuality work that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you know, like I've been doing work on myself and my sexual trauma for 15, 20 years now. And this was like the first time that I was able to sink into my body in a new level of acceptance for what has happened to me, how to move forward from it, how to accept myself, where I am in this moment in that process of healing, and how to have like hope, experience like pleasure and presence in where I am at this moment, and move in like doable ways towards what I want and what brings me joy and what brings me satisfaction and what brings me pleasure. And just the freedom from a feeling of I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck is like, wow, I would do this 10 times again, because being stuck is so excruciating and so painful and so maddening, you know, energetically, emotionally, that I feel like this was like, it's not like the floodgates opened, you know, it's not like all of a sudden I was like, I'm free and I'm healed. It's like, no, I got unstuck, which means that there's so much more room for me to breathe and like look at where I was, look at where maybe I want to go. Like there's freedom in my body and in my relationship to my sexuality at this moment that there wasn't, because I'm just not looping in the same way that I was, which is a
Mm-hmm.
gift for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. There was so many juicy tidbits that you just said in that last piece. It's funny, I was going to ask another question. I'm like, that honestly just felt like like cherry on top. I'm like, there doesn't even need to be another question. But yeah, I guess I'm just to wrap it up, I'm curious if there is anything else that you want to share, anything about, you know, how you're moving forward from this space, or yeah, anything that you feel like you haven't said that you want to touch on before we head out.
Um, well, let's see. I do think it would be fun to share my I Ching story.
Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah, because as I was deciding whether or not I wanted to sign up for the course, um, and you know, in that space of like, is this just another like, I'm gonna spend this amount of money and it's gonna feel like I got this kind of intellectual aha, but I didn't have the time, space, or tools to integrate it into my body. And that was my main concern, like knowing that I am, I know at this point in my healing, I'm like, I need integration. I need it to land somatically. Like, so I was feeling nervous about, you know, spending those resources and time and energy. And so I asked the I Ching, like, what should I do? Like, show me this course. And basically the long and the short of it was like a really poetic, you know, as it is, stanza about slow and steady winning the race and like great satisfaction coming from surrendering to a teacher. And so that was like a huge yes for me. And I just love that it spoke to pacing and slowness and steadiness. And I think, yeah, one thing I'll share is that like this work has totally impacted my relationships in a positive way. Like I am, you know, able to advocate for pacing in ways that I never have, able to let my partners in on what's happening for me in a way that I didn't have language for, able to like have allyship in my partnerships that before I felt like, you know, I was letting them down, I was disappointing them, I was, you know, I'm not able to like communicate where I'm at. And it's like it's translating to better intimacy and more satisfying sexual experiences and pleasure, but it's not like I'm doing these techniques and I'm experiencing pleasure, like it's more like I am in much deeper intimacy with myself because I can now acknowledge when I am in a free state.
Mhm.
And it's not as if it's like trying to not be in a free state. It's just I know when that's happening, and now I know to name it, and now I know that maybe there's certain things I might need to unfreeze. And this, I feel like this space cultivated the patience and like compassion for myself to be like, yeah, you're probably going to go into a free state again. That's okay. That's not the goal.
Mhm.
The goal is to learn how to like take care of yourself and be taken care of and ask and advocate for what you need in those states. And I think that's one of the biggest things that changed for me is like letting people into my experience rather than feeling like I need to like pretend something is not happening and be over here feeling isolated, lonely, and scared as to why something is happening in my body.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, like one of the things, well, like my own brain translation of a piece that you said is almost like, yeah, instead of like doing pleasure, or like instead of like doing this pleasure practice or doing this embodiment thing, it's more like, oh, I'm just being, like I'm being me and then meeting myself in the moment of what that is. So instead of the sort of more like, I don't know, active model we're often given of like, do this and do this and do this, and then you can become this. It's more like, oh no, I'm just me. And I know how to better connect to me in this moment, and how to be present with that is what is right here.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And like trust that whatever me is in this moment is okay.
Mhm.
Like there's not a version of a more sexual me that's better or more preferred. Um and yeah, I think again like really working to unshame the version of me that's stuck, the version
Mhm.
of me that's in freeze, and just be like, she's also here in my sex.
Yeah,
It's okay.
exactly. Yeah, like she can come along too, or I can know how to be with her, how to meet her, how to help myself through that experience instead of like bulldozing myself over that experience.
Yes, because I think like the frozen one is the one that felt so terrified and re-traumatized by me constantly pushing her into new courses and being like, why won't you figure it out? And it's like,
Mhm.
well, that just probably isn't going to work logically, but it's really hard, as I learned from your course, like really hard to be logical when we're in a trauma response.
Super hard, almost impossible.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for just sharing your experience and being willing to be so vulnerable and open about the experience. Like it was such a pleasure and joy to have you in the course. And um, yeah, even like when you posted the I Ching, like the words on that, like you said, like the slow and steady, but it was just so in alignment. Like even when I wrote, well, I think you sent it to me first, but I was just like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is the I Ching for this course. Like it was just so in alignment and perfect. So I love you sharing that part of the journey too, and your own discernment process into coming into, is this the right space for me?
Yeah. And I guess on that note, like, I think it's important to name that this wasn't only like a nervous system nerd space, it was also like a magical witchy portal. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I Ching messages from the beyond were like a treasured part of the experience for me and like welcomed by you. And yeah, that I feel like you hold a really like potently mystical, scientific, grounded space.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for saying those words. Potent, mystical, grounded, scientific space. I'm like, I need to take notes for that, put that on the website. Because yeah, I definitely feel like I am a witch and I am totally into the woo-woo. And I say that with no derogatory meaning at all. Like there's energetics involved in this and everything. And then I also am just deeply grounded in nervous system science. And I feel like that is some of the recipe for the potency of healing is when you can both be in those realms and like stay grounded in like yeah, some kind of grounding, but then also have access to what's up here as well.
Yeah, and the balance of those I think was really beautiful in this course. So it wasn't, we're not bypassing anything, but we're also not insisting that magic isn't real.
Definitely not. This is definitely a course for magic. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Julia. It was such a joy to have you here. Yeah, and maybe I'll see you back in the course, because that is an option for people, is just to keep retaking at a pretty discounted price too. So
Cool.
yeah, that's a joy.